From the beautiful Golden Isles of coastal Georgia, Golden Isles Primitive Baptist Fellowship presents Sunday Morning Devotional. This program comes to you each Sunday morning at 9 a.m. on this YouTube channel. Now, here's our speaker, Pastor V. Vernon Eckleberry.
Good morning. Welcome to Sunday Morning Devotional, brought to you by Golden Isles Primitive Baptist Fellowship. I'm V. Vernon Eckleberry, and this morning I have a lesson for you entitled, Welcome to the Race. To hear the full version of this lesson, we invite you in the Evans County area to worship with us at Bay Branch Primitive Baptist Church this morning at 11 o'clock. Now Brenda and Vernon will sing an old hymn that fits our theme this morning, Welcome to the Race. And the song is, Wherever He Leads, I'll Go.
Take up thy cross and follow me. I heard my Master say, I gave my life to ransom thee. Surrender your all today. Wherever He leads, I'll go. Wherever He leads, I'll go. I'll follow my Christ who loves me so. Wherever He leads, I'll go. He drew me closer to His side. I sought His will to know, and in that will I now abide. Wherever He leads, I'll go. Wherever He leads, I'll go. Wherever He leads, I'll go. I'll follow my Christ who loves me so. Wherever He leads, I'll go. My heart, my life, my all I bring to Christ who loves me so. He is my Master, Lord and King. Wherever He leads, I'll go. Wherever He leads, I'll go. Wherever He leads, I'll go. I'll follow my Christ who loves me so. Wherever He leads, I'll go.
And now, welcome to the race. This is found in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, and I'll read that to you. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. In 2 Corinthians 5:7, Paul speaks of how we live confidently in the promises of God. He said, we walk by faith, not by sight. In the 11th chapter of this book of Hebrews, we have the great souls of the Old Testament showing us how. I'll read to you the beginning of chapter 11, which is a definition of faith. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The literal translation of that is, now faith is the reality of what is hoped for. It's the proof of what is not seen. And then Paul adds verse 2, for by it the elders obtained a good report. For by it the elders literally obtained a good witness. By their experience, they are witnesses to us in our day of how great faith is in our walk in life, in the race that we are called upon to run. Ye are my witnesses, God told the people of the Old Testament. And the rest of that chapter 11 tells us how the saints of the Old Testament prevailed through great trials and tribulation because of something by faith they saw far off. And Isaiah prophesied of that they look forward to in the 65th chapter of Isaiah, verse 17. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered nor come to mind. There'll be no more tears and no more weeping, that prophecy goes on to say. Well, the world that these Old Testament people lived in wasn't the most hospitable place for them most of the time. They were persecuted. Matter of fact, in the latter part of this 11th chapter of Hebrews, it tells us of what they went through. They subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouth of lions, and they quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong. They waxed valiant in fight. They turned to flight the armies of the aliens. But women received their dead, raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yet moreover of bonds and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, they were tempted, were slain with the sword, on and on. You get the idea. The life of God's people in the Old Testament period was a life of tremendous challenges. So you can understand why they looked forward to the promise that Isaiah and others put before them. This promise drove the faith of these Old Testament saints. We read in the 11th chapter, verse 13, these all died in faith. That's a great thing to say about an individual, isn't it? They died in faith. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country, that of which Isaiah prophesied. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, that's the old world they lived in, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Paul now turns his attention toward us and how we in our day are to live the life of faith exemplified by these great souls of the Old Testament. And we read in the first verse, again, of chapter 12 in Hebrews, wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that does so easily beset us, and let us run. So the people in chapter 11 of Hebrews are seen here like a crowd in the stands of a sporting event, cheering us on, witnessing to us that we can do it too. We are compassed about. They're in the stands all around us with this great cloud of witnesses. And they cheer us on, knowing that the promise that they laid hold on through faith will be fulfilled at the end of our age. Peter wrote it this way in 2 Peter 3:13. We, according to his promise, the same promise that the people of the Old Testament believed and looked forward to by faith, will come to pass at the end of our day. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. And so Paul says, get on with it. And he places us in the arena, progressing through life as runners in a foot race. Let us run, he says. Now, how are we to run this figurative race of which Paul spoke in his own life when he said, I have finished my course. I have finished the race. Well, first of all, we read that we must prepare. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us. We need to get into our running clothes, in other words. Laying aside the excess weight, the thing that the world bogs us down, is the first necessity of preparation. Jesus calls this being heavily laden. And he invites us to come to him and lighten our burden, for his burden is light. In preparation for the race, we also must lay aside that one besetting sin. That's the thing that continually trips us up. Paul has in mind the athlete with a weakness that he or she must overcome, like a golfer with a slice, for instance. I know something about that. In our life, there are weaknesses that no matter how well we're doing, it keeps ruining our race to the finish. So each must examine themselves. You know what it is. It's a trait, a habit, a negative emotion, a practice, a pleasure, a temptation, a besetting love for some worldly thing. To successfully finish the race of faith, then, we must prepare. Secondly, Paul says we must participate. Let us run. This is when we commit ourselves to living the life that's guided by faith. Faith in the promise of God, as did our brothers and sisters listed in chapter 11 of Hebrews. The great example that's given here is Abraham. This is how he begins. This is how he participates in that race that is set before us. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should have to receive for inheritance, he obeyed. And he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. There's that promise again. And it's not something that's fulfilled in his lifetime, for he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. So there we have how Abraham was called in to begin his life of faith. That's how we began our participation in this race of which Paul speaks. I baptized a young lady in the Jordan River on one of our trips over to Israel, and I'll never forget what she said when she came up out of the water. "Thank you, Pastor, for helping me begin my adventure of faith." That's what the lives of Abraham and Jacob and Moses and Joshua and Rahab and Daniel and all the rest were all about. Living life as an adventure of faith. Thirdly, Paul says we must persevere. We run with patience, he writes in this first verse. To cross the finish line and say with Paul, "I have finished my course," we must run with patience. And in the original Greek and in most translations, this is perseverance. And perseverance means staying with it, not giving in to weariness or fatigue or boredom or lack of interest. Galatians 6:9, Paul writes, "Let us not be weary in well-doing." That's running the race of faith. "For in due season we shall reap." We'll reap when we finish the line, when we go across the finish line. "For in due season we shall reap if we faint not." Now, fourthly, Paul says we must perceive. That means discern. We must run with patience the race that is set before us. God lays out, and that's what this literally means. God lays out a way that is different for each and every one of us. Paul said, "I have finished my course, my race," not the course, not a course, but the course that God has laid out for me. Now, how can I know the course that God has laid out before me? Well, by following the one who lays it out. Let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus. By following the one who lays it out, we know our way around the course. He is the beginner and finisher of our course, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. "Follow me," Jesus says. "Come after me," he bids us. And we'll finish where he finished, where he sat down at the end. After he finished his course in this world, he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. When our eyes are trained on Jesus in prayer, in study, in worship, in obedience to his word, in good works, we will find our way. Following Jesus is the way of the race that is set before us. So welcome to the race, says Moses and Joshua and Sarah and Rebekah and Deborah and Daniel and Rahab and Abraham and Samson and all the rest. Welcome to the race, roars this great cloud of witnesses. Welcome to the race, the apostles cry out. Welcome to the race, says Jesus, the beginner and the finisher of our faith, the one who awaits us when we cross the finish line. And now may God be with you till we meet again.
Thank you for being with us today. Join us each Sunday morning at 9 a.m. right here on this YouTube channel. God bless you, and may you have a joyful Lord's Day.